I want you to take a second and just imagine your quietest, most unremarkable neighbor.
Okay, I think we all have one of those.
Right. The guy who always mows his lawn on Saturdays, waves when you drive by. Maybe he runs a local construction business, takes his kids to soccer practice. You got him in your head.
Yeah, totally. The ultimate suburban dad.
Exactly.
Right.
Now, I want you to imagine that that same neighbor has a cherry red Harley Davidson in his garage.
Oh, wow.
And not just that. Imagine he has a 30-year history spanning across the continent as a high-ranking outlaw biker who actually survived one of the deadliest motorcycle gang wars in history.
I mean, that forces you to completely reevaluate the suburbs, doesn't it?
It really does.
The contrast there between, everyday domestic life and this gritty, deeply insulated world, a world most of us only ever see dramatized in movies or on the evening news. It's incredibly sharp.
And we are getting into all of that in today's deep dive. We've got a really fascinating stack of sources to work through today.
Yeah, a great collection.
We have this really in-depth local news article from MLive, a book synopsis, an author biography, and even a deeply evocative book cover image that we'll get into later.
It paints a vivid picture.
It really does. And our mission today is to peel back those leather and dive bar stereotypes. We're going to explore how one man went from riding across the country on a whim with nothing but a sleeping bag.
Absolute freedom.
Right, to navigating a brutal international territorial conflict. And then how he somehow partnered with a group of college students to become the premier historian of a fading subculture.
Which is really where the value of these sources lies. I mean, this deep dive isn't just a biography or even just a history of motorcycles.
Right.
It is a sociological examination of how secretive subcultures operate.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at how they form out of this desire for freedom, how they evolve over decades into highly structured organizations, and how they eventually, begin to face their own obsolescence.
So the subject at the center of all this is Edward Winterhalder. Today, he's a 70-year-old guy living in Michigan.
Just a regular guy now.
Exactly. But to understand his trajectory, we have to look at the roots of the identity he adopted, like the whole concept of the outlaw biker, and specifically the 1% label. You take a corporate PR statement that was specifically designed to condemn you and marginalize you, and you just flip it into your foundational lifestyle identity.
Yeah.
You wear it as a badge of honor that says, yes, we are the ones who don't play by your rules.
It creates this immediate, impenetrable in-group, out-group dynamic. And that is the world Edward stepped into.
So how did he get involved?
Well, he returned home from military service, and in 1974, he saved up and bought his first Harley Davidson, a 1963 Panhead.
Nice.
Yeah, and he rode that bike all the way from Connecticut to Oklahoma. He was working as a heavy equipment mechanic and soon got introduced to a local motorcycle club.
And that one ride essentially kicks off a 28-year journey. I mean, the sheer volume of his time on the road is difficult to wrap your head around. Over his lifetime, he's owned more than 500 bikes.
500. It's wild.
It's insane. For decades, he would travel the country, riding through the night on a total whim. He talked about doing 300 to 400 miles a night with just a change of clothes and a saddlebag.
Which really speaks to the original appeal of the lifestyle. I mean, the physical act of riding a motorcycle 400 miles through the dark. It's one of the few ways to feel completely untethered from societal expectations.
Right, just you in the road.
Exactly. It was a lifestyle built entirely on pure, unchecked personal freedom. But, and here's where things get complicated, when you have thousands of men who refuse to answer to mainstream authority and they begin organizing into larger and larger groups, that unchecked freedom eventually collides with human ambition.
And geography, right, because pure freedom just doesn't scale.
It really doesn't.
When a local club becomes an international organization, you suddenly have borders, you have territory, and you have serious economics to worry about. Edward actually sums up this shift perfectly in the sources.
He really does.
He says the lifestyle started out as 99% fun and 1% not fun, but by the early 2000s, that ratio flipped entirely. It became 99% not fun and 1% fun.
And the mechanics of that flip are tied directly to how these clubs expanded. From 1979 to 1996, Edward was an associate of the Bandidos, which is a major club originally formed in Texas.
Okay.
By 1997, he became a prominent, high-ranking member. He was actually instrumental in expanding their organization worldwide.
Wow.
Yeah. For a long time, the major international clubs coexisted relatively peacefully. But by the late 90s, the focus shifted from simply expanding a brotherhood to securing local monopolies.
He officially retires from the club in 2003, citing a desire to spend time with his wife and daughter and focus on his business.
A well-earned retirement.
But what fascinates me about his retirement is that he didn't just fade into the background and quietly enjoy the suburbs. He became a one-man media machine.
He really did.
I mean, he published 15 books in multiple languages: Dutch, French, German, Japanese, Spanish. He produced TV shows and documentaries like Gangland, Biker Chates, and Living on the Edge.
Yeah, he was everywhere.
He was making appearances on CNN, the BBC, Fox News. But to do that accurately, to become the premier historian of a secretive underworld, he needed an edge that most guys in that lifestyle simply didn't have.
Right, he had a massive, unique advantage. Throughout his entire 28-year career as an outlaw biker, Edward didn't drink alcohol, and he didn't do drugs.
Wait, really? In a subculture famous for excess, he was completely sober.
Completely sober, which means his memories were pristine. While other members had decades of their lives blurred by substance abuse, Edward could recall exact dates, specific conversations, complex timelines.
That's incredible.
He looked around and realized that the public perception of the biker lifestyle was entirely shaped by media distortion. It was either sensationalized news reports or Hollywood exaggerations. He felt a personal responsibility to correct the historical record.
But the way he chose to document that history for his final project is brilliant. Because he doesn't just hire a ghostwriter or sit alone in a room typing, he walks into a university.
Such a wild pivot.
Right. He partners with Grand Valley State University, GVSU. He reaches out to Lisa Knapp at their Career Center. And over the course of a decade, he recruits dozens of college students to help him write the book, Real Bikers of North America.
Just picture that for a second. Imagine you are a 21-year-old grad student, and your internship involves sitting across from a man who spent 3 decades operating outside the law, asking him to clarify his life story.
The cultural whiplash there must be intense.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
You have students like Sarah Bagley, who was a grad student and motorcycle enthusiast. She sought out the project because she wanted to deeply understand the concept of brotherhood and community.
Yeah.
Or Nathan Cosart, a GVSU alumnus, who ultimately helped write 4 of the chapters.
The logistics of how they actually wrote this book are fascinating to me because it was the complete antithesis of academic scheduling. They had 0 deadlines.
Well, you can't put a hardened outlaw biker on a semester schedule.
Exactly. The interns and Edward would spend months on a single chapter. They'd pass drafts back and forth, with Edward correcting their terminology, patiently teaching these college kids the highly specific vocabulary of the underworld. They basically had to build trust from scratch.
And building that trust was the primary hurdle. As Edward pointed out, finding bikers who actually remembered things accurately was hard enough. But finding men willing to go on the record and speak to outsiders, it was nearly impossible.
Because it's a culture built entirely on secrecy.
Exactly. Several of the bikers they interviewed actually backed out before publication because the idea of putting their lives in print was just too risky.
But they did manage to get 9 men to sign releases. And the students even earned co-author credits, which Edward proudly notes is a massive boost for their resumes.
That's a pretty unique internship.
Oh, for sure. And you can really feel the weight of what this unlikely team was trying to preserve just by looking at the book's cover image provided in our sources.
Oh, the photo is striking.
It's beautiful. It's a photo of a man named Robert Rocky Harris. He rode with Edward back between 1979 and 1981 before he passed away. In the photo, Rocky is wearing a cowboy hat and a leather vest. He's looking back over his shoulder, and behind him is just this long, perfectly straight, empty desert highway stretching out to the horizon.
Yeah, it's such a powerful image.
It really is the perfect visual encapsulation of that nostalgic, fading frontier of pure freedom that they are desperately trying to archive before it disappears.
It perfectly captures the romance that drew them all in before the territorial wars took over. And what's interesting is, what the GVSU students actually discovered when they got these men talking, it completely dismantled the stereotypes they started with.
Yeah, because we hear outlaw biker, and the immediate image is uniformity. We think of a monolithic group of guys getting into fistfights at dive bars. But the 9 interviews in the book reveal an incredibly diverse ecosystem.
A huge range of backgrounds.
Right. You have a punk rock band member, you have multiple military veterans, you have one biker who literally used his motorcycle club as a mechanism to raise money to buy books for underprivileged communities.
That's not what you'd expect.
Not at all. And another retired biker dedicates his time to helping the homeless.
This diversity led to a profound realization for the student interviewers. Nathan Kosart, one of the alumni we mentioned, he formulated this brilliant analogy.
The toolbox analogy.
Yes, he compared the composition of a motorcycle club to a toolbox. He noted that if you look at a toolbox, it isn't just full of hammers. You need different tools for different situations.
I love that toolbox analogy so much because here's where it gets really interesting. If you look closely at how these clubs function, it is exactly like building a modern startup team.
How do you mean?
Well, you can't run a successful tech company if your entire staff consists of aggressive, type A visionaries. And you can't run it if it's entirely quiet, introverted engineers either.
Right, you need balance.
Exactly. You need the visionary to steer the ship, the meticulous coder to build the product, and the social marketer to sell it. A motorcycle club requires the exact same diversity of temperaments. To travel together, to manage funds, to survive rivalries across decades, you need diplomats, you need mechanics, you need strategists, and yes, you need the hammers.
But the critical difference between a startup and a motorcycle club is how they enforce that cohesion.
Fair point.
A tech startup uses equity, stock options, and human resources to ensure loyalty and performance. A 1% club doesn't have HR. They use absolute tribal loyalty, blood in, blood out patches to ensure no one leaves with the club's vulnerabilities.
Because there are no non-disclosure agreements in the underworld.
Precisely. And this intricate social dynamic is exactly why the book holds such significant academic value.
Yeah, the synopsis specifically highlights its relevance to anthropology, criminology, and sociology.
It completely validates Edward's core mission. It proves the historical public perception of the stereotypical outlaw biker is not just incomplete, it's functionally inaccurate. The common denominators are there, sure, the love of the ride, the rejection of mainstream norms, but the individual mechanisms of survival are incredibly complex.
Which brings us to why this matters to you, the listener. Because even if you never throw a leg over a motorcycle or even see a biker in real life, the underlying lesson of this deep dive is incredibly relevant.
It really is.
This story is a masterclass in recognizing the limits of media distortion. It's a vital reminder that whenever society slaps a monolithic label on a group of people, whether that's happening in pop culture, in your workplace, or in the political headlines, there is always a complex, deeply human ecosystem operating underneath. You just have to be willing to look past the leather and the patches.
And we are left with a rather haunting historical perspective, too. Edward himself compares the biker lifestyle to the dying Wild West. He notes that the original outlaw biker of the 1960s wouldn't even recognize the highly structured biker of today.
Which leads to a really fascinating thought for you to mull over. The original 1% culture, back in 1947 Hollister, was born from a pure desire for ultimate, unchecked freedom. It was a total rebellion against the rigid rules of mainstream society.
Right.
But by the 1990s, in order to protect that freedom and expand their territories, they built international hierarchies, strict internal laws, and waged violent monopolistic wars. So did these outlaw clubs essentially institutionalize their own rebellion?
Paradox.
In their effort to escape society, did they essentially build a structure that was even more rigid, ruthless, and demanding than the corporate world they originally fled?
It is the ultimate irony of outcasts organizing. You build a fortress to protect your freedom, and eventually the walls of the fortress become the very thing that traps you inside.
So the next time you see your quiet, normal neighbor waving from his driveway, just remember, you never really know what kind of history might be hiding under a tarp in the garage.
Never judge a book by its cover.